Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with Impulse Storm, our level 19 Brute, who is the character I'm using to play the game while I rant about role-playing D&D, Star Frontiers, Champions, and other things. So I hope you're enjoying my rants. I haven't actually, as of the time of this recording, haven't actually posted any of my rants yet. I'm still not 100% sure that I will. I don't know. I've got to convince myself that people will want to watch me play the game while I rant about stuff that has nothing to do with City of Heroes. Um, so I don't know. I'd say let me know, but by the time you're watching this, if you are, I will have already made my decision. Anyway, we're on a story arc for Wyatt Anderson. And we got to defeat 15 Clockworks. I don't know if we're going to be able to just complete this. No, we have to wait a little while. So we're going to have to do it, and we will talk as we go. So Clockworks, where's a good place to find them? I think we'll do Steel Canyon, since that's where Wyatt's from, and they'll be pretty easy to find there. Um, so as we go, let's talk about a couple of things. So one of the things that I want to talk about is role-playing versus role-playing. So someone asked a question on a live stream, and he asked the GM, and I guess he kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of triggered the GM, because the GM kind of went on a rant. And what he said in the question was, how much in how much of your game, sort of what percentage of your game is role playing when you guys are playing? And the GM said 100%. We role play from the moment we sit down. Are we being ambushed? Oh, we are. We role play from the moment we sit down until the moment we stop. We role play for 4 hours if it's a 4-hour session. 6 hours if it's a 6-hour session. It's role play the whole time. Now, of course, so he said, look, if you're in combat, you're role playing. He'd say, right now, what I'm doing, he would say, is role playing. Right? My character is attacking cogs and trying to find information about the Clockworks so that we can rescue somebody. And this is it's role playing. It's all role playing. 100% of it. Everything you do in a role playing game is role playing, right? Of course, I said, now come on. We both know that's not what he was asking about. The player then went on to say, and he called it a particular show, so I'll mention it. I really hate talking about Critical Role because I know Critical Role has an insane following of crazy fanboys and fangirls, and if you dare say anything negative about it, they'll downvote your channel, and I really don't want to get downvoted. And I'm not trying to really say anything negative about it, but, you know, basically saying they're anything other than perfect seems to call out the trolls. Anyway, I'll say it, because he said it. The person asking the question said, I know that, how did he say it? I know that Critical Role is just a show, not really a game, right? They're playing the game on the show, but it's a show, and that it's not really the way people play D&D, but, he sort of wanted to know what's your balance compared to a show like that of combat versus exploration versus roleplay. And what the person who was doing the stream said is, well, what you really mean, because all of it's role-playing. When your characters are exploring a dungeon, you're role-playing, right? You are technically role-playing, right? Because they're going through the dungeon, and in your imagination, they're going through a dungeon, right? When they're in combat, you're role-playing. They're doing what the moves they would do in a battle. And of course, when you're doing social encounters, right? So he said, what you really mean is social, like sort of the proportion of social versus exploration versus combat. What's your balance? And he said, well, it depends on, what group I'm running and what the players prefer and what I prefer and so on. And it may change from week to week and so on, which is true for me too. For instance, the last session I ran, there was no combat. There was one skill challenge. There was a lot of social among the party and a little bit of social a little bit of social with some NPCs, and then there was buying items and leveling up and stuff like that, and travel to roam from essentially Sicily, right, by boat, and planning and discussion of how they're going to breach what they think is, and they are correct if they think this, the final base of the villains. And so there wasn't any combat at all. The week before, they had decided to take out 4 successive UNT patrols. I think this was possibly after fighting a dragon. I can't remember if they... No, I think they had fought the dragon the week before, but they took out 4 successive UNT patrols. And then they tried to free some prisoners, and it turned out some of them were shapeshifted UNT, and they fought them. So they got into 5 battles in like a 3-hour period. And they were mostly easy battles. They weren't super hard. A few people got a little injured. Nobody went to 0 hit points or anything. And after that, the session was over. So it was a lot of combat. And there really wasn't a lot of social, and there was almost no exploration, right? Because they had already actually been in that part of the city and explored it, and they knew what was there. And they had, like, prepped for this and then went off to attack the UNT guards, right? So from session to session, there's often a different balance, and then certainly from group to group, different players and GMs in combination like different levels of social versus exploration versus combat. But he was very emphatic. Combat. All those things are roleplay, and social and roleplay aren't synonymous, and people are using them synonymously. However, I would argue that although, technically what I'm doing is role-playing with this character, I'm not particularly in character with her right now. I'm talking to you guys about metagaming stuff, right? I think to some degree, one of the things people are asking about when they ask a question like this, when they say, how much do you guys role-play? You say, well, when we're in combat, it's roleplay. Well, that's not what they mean. What they mean is, how much are you in character, right? Like, do you talk about what your character is thinking? No, we're not talking about doing voices. Not everyone can do voices, and not everyone likes to. I don't, generally. We're not talking about doing voices, and we're not necessarily even talking about first-person dialogue, where you're actually speaking the lines of dialogue that your character would say word for word. Impulse Storm says, blast you, you terrible clockwork. I'm going to turn you into scrap, right? Versus Impulse Storm walks up to the clockwork, yells an insult, and smashes him. And both of those are role-playing, and both of those are in character, right? But I would argue, if you're, say, talking about how a spell works in game, right? You're sitting there as a group, and you're saying, like, how does this spell exactly work? That, it's role-playing in the sense that you're playing a role-playing game, you're thinking about what your characters would do, and you're trying to clarify how it's going to work, but the conversation about how this spell works is not in character. And I think what a lot of people are asking is, how much are you and your group in character, and how much are you out of character? Right? So I would argue that, like, at least what's coming out of my mouth in this series has been almost entirely out of character. Right? Whereas if you look at, say, Silver Phoenix, right? That playthrough, I was very methodically going through, and I was reading every line of contact text and mission text. Now, I wasn't speaking Silver Phoenix's words, but I would argue that I was much more in character while playing that game with you guys than I am here. Because here, I'm talking about, like, D&D and stuff like that. And that has nothing to do with what this character is experiencing. Whereas with Silver Phoenix, I was mostly talking about what that character was experiencing, and I was reading the lines of dialogue that the NPCs were saying to her, right? And that is much more in character. So I think what this questioner was trying to ask is, how much are you guys in character, right? And one of the things um, that we see in a show like Wild Cards or Critical Role is that the players speak in character a lot. And so I think, and a lot of gaming groups don't. And, they just sort of, they just say, okay, my character attacks and I do 5 damage, right? And that's role playing, but it's not in character, right? Your character doesn't think in points of damage, right? Whereas if you say, I attack, and I say, fie upon you, foul-feeted abomination! Let this world be cleansed of such filth as thy brethren, and I thrust my long sword into his heart. That's speaking in character. Now, I attack and do 5 damage is still role-playing, right? But it's not speaking in character, right? And again, you don't have to do the dialogue like that. You could say, my paladin hurls an insult and appeals to his god and then jabs him with a sword and sticks it into his heart, right? That's in character, but it's not. That's role playing and it's in character. It's not out of character, right? So I think you can make a lot of different distinctions, and one of them is how much of the game, for how much of the conversation are you guys out of character, right? Talking about game rules, talking about what, pass me the snacks, right? And how much of are you in character and talking about what your characters are experiencing in the game, in theme, right? Thematically. And I think one of the things that distinguishes some of these shows, because they're shows and they know that it's not interesting to the audience to watch them passing the chips or to listen to them talking about the finer points of game rules, right? So you'll often hear the GM say, we're going to play it this way for now, which you should at the table anyway, but we're going to, very quickly, they'll say, we'll play it this way for now and we'll look it up in between sessions, because it would not be interesting. Not only isn't it that interesting for players, some players like talking about rules. My group, we kind of do, and so sometimes we do get sidetracked by the rules a little bit because several of us are sort of rules oriented, like me and my best friend, and at least one of the other players in the group, maybe all but the newest girl. We like playing it right. We like understanding what the rules say, right? And so that's fun for us. But we're not in character when we're doing that, right? And it wouldn't be interesting to watch if somebody were watching us. Not that our game would be interesting to watch anyway, but that would be even less interesting, right, than it would be otherwise. And so, yeah, I think this person, what they were asking was, how much of the game is in character and how much of it is out of character, right? How much are you thinking about and talking about things in terms of what the players would see, what the characters would see, right? He's injured, he's bleeding from the lip, there's sweat pouring down his face. That's in character, right? He's taken 15 hit points of damage, is out of character. It's still role playing, but it's not necessarily in character. And one of the things that I think sometimes people get upset about is they don't like out of character stuff, right? You shouldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. A role-playing game is always a combination of some in character and some out of character stuff. It has to be, because the rules are out of character, right? The technicalities of the rules, right? The streak breaker in City of Heroes is not an in-character mechanism. It's an out-of-character mechanism, right? But it has in-character results in that, you hit an enemy and in character he goes down, right? And so you kind of have to discuss the out-of-character stuff as part of the game. And you certainly have to pass the chips or pass the pizza or the beer or whatever, right? And it's all part of the game. Having out of character, and I think good groups can seamlessly flow between in and out of character conversation. And I think that one of the things that makes the shows a bad example, and they really are in some ways, and one of the ways is that because it's a show, they're trying to minimize as much as possible the out of character chit chat, right? Because that's not what people tuned in to watch. And so they try to minimize the out of character chit chat. And they know each other really well, and they have a whole bunch of embedded house rules that they've been using for years and years and years because they've been playing together for a long time, and they know each other's beats and rhythms and so on, right? And so they don't have to stop and have these normal out of character discussions about how the game works, or about how they want to approach something, or about how they should roleplay a scene, or about whether everybody's okay with the way the scene is going. They don't have to have these out of character discussions. They don't need them. But the rest of us do. And one of the marks of a really good group of gamers who know each other well and play well together and aren't running a show is that they can seamlessly switch between in character and out of character. You don't even have to ask, which one is this? You just know. And so you can just seamlessly switch. We're talking about rules, and then all of a sudden somebody does an in-character interpretation of the rule, right? And that's what my group, and I'm not trying to like toot our horn. We're not the greatest game group ever, but that's what my group is like. We pretty seamlessly switch between in-character and out-of-character modes as needed, right? We're role-playing the whole time, but we're not in character the whole time. And I think that's actually a really important skill for groups of gamers to cultivate together. And it's also it's something you have to kind of work out with the group. Everybody's going to have a different sort of balance point. Every group is going to have its own preferred balance point of where they're going to settle in terms of the mix of in character and out of character in their role play. It's all still role play, but some of it's more out of character role play, as it were, and some of it's more in character role play. And it's not only is it okay to mix them, you kind of have to. And I think that people who refuse to are being silly. I remember when I was I guess what this person was asking reminds me of distinctions that we have in MMOs, right? And when you're in a guild and you're trying to join a roleplay guild, right? One of the things that you need to find out about the guild is whether the guild membership is what's called hardcore roleplay, moderate roleplay, or light roleplay, right? And I always remember that one description of like a hardcore role player is literally never out of character. They always say everything in character. They never talk about game mechanics. They don't make any out of character comments, right? That the one person said a hardcore role player is always in character all the time, the whole time they're on the game, and they never ever say anything out of character. They're going to talk about guild stuff in character. They're going to do everything in character, right? A light roleplay person is probably out of character as much, if not more, than they're in, right? They will go in character, but what they're doing is they're probably out of character a lot, and then they go in character for certain roleplay scenes with the guild. If we're going to start role-playing now, and then we start to roleplay, right? And then a moderate role player is somebody who's in character by default, right? But recognizes out of character channels and speaks out of character, right? So, for example, in this game, you can do chat channels, and our guild always had an out of character chat channel that you could use to chit chat with each other out of character about the game, or about anything that's not in character. You're not speaking your character's voice. Or like when we played, if we were in a group, we used local here, right? We used local, the word balloons. these things that came up off over your head and the local word balloons, we use them for roleplay. You can only see the word balloons if you're close enough, right? So if you were on another level, and you were like the level below me in this elevator, you wouldn't be able to see the local chat. But if we were in a group, you could see the group chat. You would type /G. I can't do it here because I'm not in a group, but you type /G and then space and then whatever you typed after it, and there would be a little beep when you typed it, did like that, to let you alert you a group chat just came through, and it would show up by default in green. And I used to have it show up in a different channel, so I actually had my chat channels divided down here. One said RP on it, and it only had local, and supergroup, because the supergroup radio was in character, and it was how you like communicated with the team in character, right? And then I had a second tab that was OOC, right? And I had tells and group chat and the group channel, the OOC out of character chat channel in there. And so the fact that we had out of character mechanisms to do anything would have been described by the person who was talking about the different types of role players. Not a hardcore role play group, because hardcore role play groups do not have out of character channels. They don't recognize out of character at all, and everything you do in the guild, on the guild forum, whatever, is all done in character. Now, I would argue that that's like 0.01% of all role players in the world. Very few groups are hardcore like that. So that's hardcore. Then moderate would be what our group was, where we had these in-character channels, and we sort of were, moderate is in character by default, out of character when you mark something as out of character, right? Sometimes we would do this if we weren't in group chat to demarcate this is out of character. Or sometimes you'll see something like this, right? And that marks it as out of character, right? So that is, you type normally when you're in character, and then you do something to mark it when you're out of character, right? So that's sort of, I would argue that's normal roleplay. That's moderate roleplay, by the definition that I was talking about. Hardcore is they never do out of character. If you try to type out of character stuff, they'll either ignore it or they'll take your out of character. This drives me nuts. They'll take your out of character comment and respond to it in character, which drives me absolutely up the wall because I'm not making an in character comment. My character did not say this in world. I'm asking you, the player, can you keep playing tonight? Right? I mean, the idea that you're going to answer that by having your character say, I have classes. And I don't know whether you're saying you have classes for real or your character has just classes over at the university we just passed. That drives me nuts. I don't really like that. And I've only ever met a tiny number of people who do that. Most people are, most role players are what I'd say is moderate role play in character by default, but they certainly communicate plenty out of character. Now, where are we going to go here? Let's find a contact. We're 19th level, so we can't do Doc Delilah yet. I think we might be able to do Sanjay. So let's go see him in Skyway City. And then, of course, light role play is sort of the flip side, where you're out of character most of the time by default, and you only go in character when you specify, and that the rest of the time you just default to out of character. And I mean, that's how a lot of guilds are. Like, most of my guilds are on the forum. The guild forum has one in-character section, and all the rest of it is out of character. You're talking about guild maintenance, you're talking about when people can show up, scheduling sessions, talking about how to get the base set up, can people go hunt more prestige, we need to buy a new teleporter. That's all out of character crap, right? That's not in character, and you're just sort of setting up the out of character maintenance of the group, right? People, you need to log in. If you don't log in at least once a month, you're going to get booted from the group. You could make that stuff in character, but it's actually out of character stuff. And most guilds, every guild I've ever been in, does that using out of character means. And so, like in game, the guild is default in character, but out of game, like on the forums, they're default out of character, right? Well, I guess this guy is not going to be a contact for us because we have already done out leveled him. So now we're going to go to Skyway City South. Oh, I went the wrong place. Click the wrong button. No, I don't want Talos Island. We will come here, hit another level or so after we finish Dock Delilah, but right now we're trying to go to Skyway City South. So that's kind of, social is the time in the session is being taken up with character conversations, either among the PCs or between PCs and NPCs. Right? That's what the social part means. And that part is, and I think one of the reasons people call that quote unquote role play rather than social is because that part kind of can't be done out of character. I mean, you can speak out of character, right? But the social part is usually an in-character based discussion, right? Unless you're going to count social as wasting disease, another story arc. Unless you're going to count social as things like while we're talking about what pizza we're going to order, right? But if you're having your characters interact with NPCs or with each other, even if you're not doing the dialogue and you're just saying, my character is going to try and convince using whatever words I can think of, he can think of that I can't because he has an 18 intelligence and I don't. He's going to try to convince this person to give us the weapons, right? And then the GM says make a roll, and that's all sort of in character. But in combat, you can be out of character when you're talking about rules, right? I guess you can be out of character in social when you're talking about rules for social encounters as well. So I take that back. But yeah. So what's the right combo of in character, out of character? I would say I agree with what I said at the beginning and what this person on the stream was saying. Is it's up to your group, right? It's whatever your group likes. There is no right way to do it. There's a wrong way to do this, though, and I did it by aggroing too many of these guys. I'm going to alternate them, try to keep them a little KB because... we got a heal. I was going to say I'm almost at... I only have one heal left, but we got one. Man, these guys are just so brutal to every single type of character. Whether it's in Vuln, whether it's super reflex, willpower. The Vajilok vomit is just so brutal. So yeah, there's no right and wrong combo objectively of combat or exploration, social. It's whatever you want and whatever your group wants is the right thing. But you always need to make sure you know whether you're doing something, whether you're in character, out of character. I mean, I think the most important thing is making sure to separate in character and out of character, and not to take personally out of character what's going on in character. That's really important. And I've seen a lot of groups messed up by that. And sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes what's going on in character is ticking you off in real life out of character. When my best friend had his character constantly stealing from the party as a kleptomaniac, that was driving me nuts. I hated that. right? And it was an in-character act that, as a player out of character, I was really annoyed by, right? And it was a very difficult circumstance, and I think I could have handled it way better. He obviously could have handled it way better. Um, there's simply no question that he could have handled it better. But I could have handled it a lot better too. And I think, yeah, we were young, we were in high school, so yeah, high school kids don't always handle things well. You don't have the experience to know the smart or responsible way to handle things, and so that can be very difficult. You don't have the maturity, right? The emotional maturity, the intellectual maturity to handle things like an adult because you're not yet. And so, yeah, we didn't handle that very well, neither he nor I. Um, but, and it's really interesting. It's not, that whole circumstance, it wasn't just the fact, it wasn't even mainly the fact that he was stealing stuff from my characters, right? I almost didn't even care specifically about that. My problem was, like, he knew we all hated it, and he just was like, I'm doing it anyway, because that's what my character would do. And he really didn't understand why we hated it. Why are you guys making such a big deal? I'm just playing my character. It's just role play. What's the big deal? And on a certain level, he was right. It was just role play. But if it's role play that, for whatever reason, is annoying the other players, you got to think twice about it, and maybe more than that. So let me give you a great example. As I said, my game is wrapping up sometime in the next couple of months. My game will be over, and it's now pretty clear that my best friend is going to be running a game shortly thereafter. Now, my game's probably going to end around Halloween, maybe a little before that. His game isn't probably going to start until after the holidays. So I don't know what we're going to do in between. I'm going to see if I can get them to let me run a Pathfinder for Savage Worlds one-shot or something. But I'm already, thinking of character ideas, and I've got 3 character concepts already. None of them are Silver Phoenix, by the way. But I got 3 character concepts already. A paladin, who I'm thinking of being kind of like David Putty. Yeah, that's right. Sort of talking in a little deeper voice, and not too bright, and very sort of superficial, and only thinks about things on the surface. And he's very black and white, good and evil. He's a lawful good paladin, and yeah, I'm serving my god. Why are you questioning me? This is what my god wants. I'm here to smite evil. And that's one concept. Another concept I have is, because of the game Holler, which is based in part on his books, and I'd never heard of it before, I've been reading Mandy Wade Wellman's John the Balladeer short stories. It's almost impossible to get your hands on the stories, because they were published in magazines in the 50s. There was a collection published in the 80s. That collection is out of print, so I had to pay an arm and a leg, $80 for a near mint paperback, because they're collector's items now. Oh God, never buy a collector's item. It's such a pain. But I really wanted to read them, and I was hoping to maybe get a chance to run some Holler. And I thought, okay, well, before I run it, I better know what I'm getting into genre-wise. And so, I'm watching this guy to see when he's going to blow up, and we'll let him do that. So I've been reading about John the Balladeer, or AKA Silver John, and so he's basically where the Bard, I believe it's where the Bard class came from in original D&D, right? The idea for it, is what gave Gygax the idea to make it the way he did, was John the Balladeer. And so John is this guy who, he's basically a self-taught musician who has a silver-strung guitar, so it's got silver strings, and the silver strings sort of allow him to counter black magic, and it's very, very subtle type of magic, very, very, it's very subtle. It's not a lot of like flashy stuff. It's very interesting. I like it a lot, and And I like the idea of this guy with the silver strung guitar, and also the thing is he's like he goes around the Appalachian Mountains, basically singing for his meals, entertaining for his meals and stuff, and collecting a lot of folk tales. And I thought, oh, this kind of goes a little bit with the bard idea that I had originally. Well, it was going to be a female character, now it's a male character. Um, Not that I couldn't do it with a female, but I, started making up kind of Silver John, and a character who, like him, goes around the Forgotten Realms picking up tales and lore and so on. It's going to be a lore bard. And the idea, like the white magic, I thought, okay, I'm going to limit his spells to non-damaging spells. He would only be able to cast healing and buffing and maybe confuse, disorient, hold person, but nothing damaging, right? I might do something simple like vicious mockery, but he's not gonna be doing things like casting magic missile and fireball and that kind of stuff, because he's doing white magic, and white magic is like kindness magic, good magic, positive magic, right? And so, so there's that character, and then I got the idea to make a pirate, like a dual wielding pirate, basically based on the character of Isabella from the Dragon Age games, who in the first game teaches your character how to dual wield. In the second game, she becomes a more important NPC, and she's actually pretty cool. Actually, she's one of my favorite NPCs in, maybe my favorite NPC in Dragon Age 2, which is a game I didn't actually love that much, but I really liked her. She was very cool, very interesting, and fun character, and so, and she's cool looking as a pirate. She's got a really cool look to her. So I thought, okay, I could make up a character like that who like dual wields cutlasses, and there is a swashbuckler type of rogue subclass and a pirate variant background, and so I thought, okay, I could maybe do that. So those are my three options. And I came up with her after thinking about the paladin a little bit, because the problem with the paladin is that the paladin is honorable, right? He's a bit of a blockhead, he's a bit stubborn, but the most important thing about him is he has a code of honor. So I said, because of the code of honor, he will not sneak attack people. He's not going to hit them from behind. He's not going to hit them by surprise. He will declare himself and insist on fair fights. If his enemy is unarmed, he will say, arm yourself. Prepare to defend yourself from battle. Get out, get out, get out. No, I didn't get out fast enough. And he also probably would be unwilling to stand by and allow the party to sneak attack somebody else. Even if he doesn't do it, he will almost certainly not allow that. And so I could easily see him, and somebody was telling me in my supergroup guild when I was mentioning this that she played a paladin like this, and she said, yeah, her paladin literally several times shouted out, hey, we're hiding in the bushes waiting to ambush you, right? And her party, her players were fine with it, but I said, I don't know if my players are going to like that, right? The players that I've been playing with, they do a lot of surprise attacks, sneak attacks, take every advantage they can in combat. They seem to like to get unfair advantages over the monsters and use them to win battles. And I'm absolutely fine with that as a game master. I don't care. None of them are honorable, right? But if I'm playing an honorable character, he's not going to be okay with that. He's going to say this is dishonorable and I'm not on board with this. And so I thought this guy could really frustrate the other players, because they might want to do the optimal thing, which is to get a surprise round in on the bad guys, and my guy is going to say, no, I'm going to alert them to our presence so that they have a chance to arm themselves and prepare for battle. And that might really irritate the other players. I don't know. It could. And I thought, okay, well, I could play the bard, but then I thought, well, if I make up a character who's not necessarily a pacifist, but who refuses to use, he'll shoot his crossbow to do damage, but he refuses to use his magic, or he can't use his magic to do damage because it's white magic and white magic doesn't do damage or something. Um, if if he does that, if he acts that way, or if I impose that limitation on him, that might frustrate them too. Now I'm going to pause and read this and then I'll continue. Okay, none of these are story arc. I thought we were getting into a story arc, but they're not. So now we got to go fight outcasts. You know, I thought the other one was fight outcasts on the street, but apparently both of them are fight outcasts on the street, which is really annoying. So I thought, okay, if I refuse to take offensive spells for the bard, like damaging spells for the bard, that might annoy them because I'm not doing enough damage, right? If I play a paladin who refuses to let them do sneak attacks, that might annoy them. So I said, all right, what else could I do? And I thought, well, I could potentially make up a rogue, right? The rogue will have no problem backstabbing people and will certainly do lots of damage, right? So if they express a desire for me not to play those other two characters, I could play a rogue, and that's where I came up with the swashbuckling character. So I've got 3 ideas. I don't know which one I'm going to play. Depends on what everybody else is playing. But I said, okay, well, this gives me some options so that the if what I've picked is going to annoy the players, I'll play something else. Right. So part of what you have to think about when you're deciding whether to be in character or out of character is, will the choices you've made for in character stuff be things that are going to annoy the other players, right? It could be very frustrating to a player who wants to play a sneaky rogue and wants to backstab and wants that whole feel of the espionage and the sneaking and the deception. It could be very, very frustrating to that player if my character keeps walking up to people and saying, he's lying to you. Or, hey, we're waiting for you in the bushes. Don't let us ambush you. Get your weapons out. Right? That could be extremely frustrating to the other players who want to enjoy the tactical situation of making a surprise attack, or who want to do the role play of sneaking up behind somebody and stabbing them in the back. And they could find it extremely annoying if one of the people in the party keeps stopping them from doing this thing that they, made up this whole character in order to do, right? So that's why you have to have some consideration for the other players, right? And you never be so in character that you're not willing to come out of character and ask, is this something that the other players like? Is it something the other players are okay with? Again, we get back to the same thing that I've been saying all along, which is that as a player, right, as players and as GMs, we have a responsibility to be the shepherds, the stewards of each other's fun. And so if you are playing a character whose very actions in character are going to potentially prevent other players from doing the actions they want in character, and thus potentially reduce their enjoyment that they're getting from their own characters, that's something that you want to be very careful not to do, right? You want to make sure that everybody is enjoying the game, not just you, and you don't want your concept to trump the other concepts or to interfere with the other concepts. And so that's why I've got, 3 character concepts. If the other players, aren't sure they're going to like playing with some of them, then one or two of them, I can bring out another one. And if they don't like all three of them, I can make up something else, right? So that's that's really my point. And so I think that, how does this relate to how we started? Um, when you are talking about the balance between roleplay, combat, and exploration, usually it's not the combat and it's not the exploration that causes player to player rifts. It's the social part, right? When your character is being role played in a way that the other players aren't cool with. Imagine if your character is hypersexualizing things and always like flirting, and you're role playing, you're reaching out trying to touch the other character, and the other player is being made uncomfortable by this and doesn't like it, right? So it is often the social part that we struggle the most with, and that's the one that often causes the out of character conflicts. And so you can prevent that by making sure you go out of character, right? Don't take a cue from these shows. The people on these shows all know what each other's comfortable with, and they've known each other for years and years and years, and they play together since 2012 or something, and maybe before that, maybe since 2000, maybe since the 90s, and so they're very comfortable with each other. They know what each other is happy with, and they play together a lot. It's sort of like my old friends from Champions and stuff. Nobody was asking each other if we were okay with things after 8 years of Champions. We knew what each other liked. We didn't have to ask. Okay? But if you're not in a group that is intuitively like that, you have to keep going out of character and checking in with the other players and shifting from in character out of character to make sure that the in character stuff is okay with everybody out of character. So make sure that you do that, and particularly pay attention to that when you're doing the social role play part of the game, right? It's a lot less common for these issues to come up in combat, although if your character's not pulling their weight in combat, that could annoy people. If you're role playing a character that's bad at combat and you're purposely screwing up the combat and getting other characters killed, that could annoy other players. Again, you've got to ask about that. But it's usually the social component that causes the most difficulty. And so make sure you're always assessing, evaluating, step back from what you're doing and ask, is this something that could annoy other players? Are the other players looking irritated? Are they rolling their eyes? Are they getting frustrated? Are they giving me signs that they're not happy with this? And if so, how can I fix it? Right? Talk to each other. Don't just keep doing it and not ask what the story is and whether everybody's happy, right? So always make sure that you check in with the other players. I think that's enough for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. I certainly did. We're near 20th level. I might just get there with street hunting, because it looks like those are all the missions I'm getting now. And then at level 20, we'll go see Dr. Lila. And if I do have to do just street hunting, I will not make you watch that. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.